There is so much hype around AI right now and what it means for businesses. But here's the thing. Everything happening right now in AI just comes down to 5 words. And understanding those 5 words is what separates those who actually understand AI from the ones who are just nodding along in meetings but are actually confused. And so in this video, I'm going to be walking you through the only 5 concepts that you need to know about AI in simple terms, what each one is, and exactly what that means for businesses and teams. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to look at anything related to AI and ask the right questions. What does it cost? How much it can remember? And what the heck even is an AI agent? I'm going to make it so simple for you, even if you're not technical and even if you've never used anything more than ChatGPT. If you're new here, my name is Yaseen. I spent the last 12 years as an entrepreneur and founder across 4 different industries, previously partnered with the startups of Google Ventures and Goldman Sachs to scale, and now my team and I help simplify AI and implement it into businesses. And on this channel, I share what we're seeing is proven and working right now. Practical AI and business. So let's jump right into it. The first 3 words that you need to know live inside what I call the AI's brain. And so every single AI tool has a brain at the center of it. Sometimes you're going to hear that known as the model. And so the first 3 words that we're going to talk about is what is an LLM, a large language model. We'll talk about what is a token, and then what is a context window. This is going to be the foundation of how Claude's Anthropic models work, how ChatGPT's models work, how Gemini models work, how Microsoft Copilot models work. It does not matter what AI you are talking about, they're going to all have some sort of brain. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about when you understand the foundations of the brain, what happens when you then give AI hands and feet and it can now do things. That's going to be where we talk about the next set of words that you're going to learn. And so the quick overview of this, and I'll talk more about it in just a second, but the LLM, also known as the large language model, that's going to be the brain itself. Then we're going to talk about the token, which is the unit that an LLM thinks in. And so humans have calories, AI has something called a token, and I'll talk to you more about that. And then you have context window. And context window is what is its working memory? How much can it hold at once inside of its mind as it's doing work? That's going to be foundational for you to understand. So let's talk about that first piece, which is an LLM. What does that even mean? So LLM stands for large language model. That is what an AI is. Every AI that is going popular right now is effectively called an LLM. It's a large language model. What it is it's a brain that has been trained on all of the internet. And all an LLM does is it just gets really good at predicting the next piece of the sentence. And so, for example, if you have the meeting is on, right? And then you have Tuesday or Friday. Well, what an LLM does based off of a bunch of different computations is it predicts based off of all of the context that it has thus far what that next word is going to be. That's all a large language model does. And that is at the heart of no matter what type of AI you are talking about, all of them are large language models. The big thing that you want to understand about LLMs is that they are not programmed the way that software was programmed. It's not something like somebody sat down to write a bunch of code. It's that LLMs and AI is trained. And what the researchers did is that they go ahead and give it a bunch of information and then they train it on what the next word is going to be. And so what it does is it's always predicting and it's never looking up. So there is no database on the inside of an AI. And that's the whole thing. It's kind of like autocomplete on your iPhone and on your keyboard, but just scaled up to a huge degree so that it just goes ahead and predicts what the next word is going to be. But why is that prediction engine very important? The reason is because even though it can be brilliant, it can really do a great job of predicting what the next thing is going to be, it can also therefore be confidently wrong because it's always doing some sort of probability, it's always doing some sort of guess of what the next word is going to be. And so because it predicts instead of looking things up, it can sound completely sure even though it might be wrong. And so this is the reason why in business, it's a very different game when using AI compared to doing it in a B2C or a consumer environment. Because let's say, for example, you're going ahead and talking to a prospect. There's going to be sales emails. There's going to be summaries. There are going to be things like contracts that are going to go ahead and be pointed out here. It's going to be very important to understand that AI can hallucinate is what they call it, okay? So when it hallucinates, it means that it's going ahead and predicting the next thing and it might be wrong. And that's the reason why you'll hear a lot of times whenever anybody is implementing AI and they know what they are doing, a lot of times they will have some sort of thing called human in the loop. When you have a human in the loop inside of that workflow, what you're doing is you're having some sort of part in the process where a human is verifying what that output looks like, especially in high stakes environments. Now, of course, if the stakes are low, no problem. You can go ahead and have AI do a ton of the work there. But then for the things that really matter, this is why when you're architecting some of these implementations for businesses, you need to know what are the pieces that a human is going to be in the loop for. And so that way, yes, you're trusting AI, but you're making sure that you are in fact verifying it as well. So that's the first very important word that you need to be familiar with if you are in business, is understanding an LLM, a large language model, and really just the gist of how it works. The next word is going to be token. So what is a token? A token is what a calorie is to an AI. And what a token does is that, remember how I went ahead and said that it's going ahead and being trained on all of the information on the internet? Well, what it will do is it will take a word, let's say we take the word unbelievable, and it'll actually go ahead and split it up into multiple different chunks. And so every word gets chopped up into those small chunks, and those small chunks are called tokens. And a token is roughly between 3 to 5 characters. And so an AI doesn't read word by word, it reads token by token. This is the reason why sometimes you will hear people say next token prediction is how LLMs work. So next token prediction instead of next word prediction. That's what that means. It's predicting the next token, and the next token is going to be that next 3 to 5 characters roughly. And so what happens is that when you give an LLM the word unbelievable, it's going to go ahead and break it up into unbelievable, right? So again, I give you the example of a calorie. Very similar to that is that if you're eating a donut, there's going to be, let's say, 200 calories inside of a donut, and your body's going to absorb that. Your body doesn't absorb donuts, it absorbs calories. And so your body doesn't really know the difference between a donut or a piece of chicken. It sees that there's calories. That's what happens inside of an AI, is it's breaking down all of those different words, all of the different input that it gets into tokens. The reason why this is important is because tokens are how AI is counted. And so whenever you're talking about the cost of AI, you're talking about the speed of AI, you're talking about the limits of AI, all of those are counted in tokens. And so whenever you go online and you hear about, oh, Anthropic went ahead and just released their new model, or hey, OpenAI just released their new model, all of those are going to be priced in per millions of tokens. And before, if you didn't know what a token was, it's easy to get confused and say, oh man, what does that mean, price per million tokens? Well, now you understand. It's basically the input and the output of what an AI is, all in tokens. That is how the entire economy of AI is based off of. Now, once you understand the idea of tokens, you can then understand the next piece, which is the third word out of the 5 that's critical for you to understand, which is context window. So what is a context window? Every AI has a measuring stick on how much memory it can hold in its mind at any given moment. So just like a human being, they say on average you can remember about 7 things at once. This is the reason why phone numbers are 7 characters. That's what context window is for an AI, is its working memory, everything that it can remember in one place at one time. Now, the reason I said that you have to understand why the token idea is important is because context window, its working memory, is also measured in tokens. And so it's going to be that same unit again. The window is going to be how much budget it has to be able to remember the email you told it to remember, the contract you told it to remember, the notes that you told it to remember. All of that is going to be inside of the context window. Now, the reason why that's critical then is because when the context window fills up, that's going to be when things start to slip out. And so if you've ever had a conversation with ChatGPT or Claude and you're going back and forth with it, and then after a while, it just starts to forget. It has like amnesia and it starts to degrade. The performance of it starts to get worse. That's because you went ahead and hit the context window. Now, these days, a lot of the LLMs that are out there have about 1 million token context window. The reason why this is key is because that 1 million tokens includes all of the messages that you sent it, all of the messages that it sent you, as well as any other attachments that you wanted the LLM or the AI to remember. All of that is going to eat away at that 1 million token context window. Now, one question you might have is, okay, Yaseen, I kind of understand the gist of a context window and tokens, but where do I see how much of the context window, how many tokens I've used inside of a session, inside of a window when I'm using AI? So let me go ahead and show you a couple different things. Right now I'm inside of Cowork. If I go ahead and type in /context and I go ahead and send that, what you're going to see is that Claude is going to go ahead and tell me inside of this session thus far how many tokens I've gone ahead and used. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll all the way to the top of the output that it went ahead and gave me. And you'll see right now, I'm using Claude Opus 4.6, and I have gone ahead and used 75,000 out of the 200,000 tokens that this model has. Now, you might say, hey, Yaseen, but you just told me right now that most models have a 1,000,000 token context window. Yes, that is true, but right now you'll see I'm on Opus 4.6. If I go ahead and now start a new task, and I switch this to Opus 4.8, and I say, hi, how are you? And then I go ahead and do context from there. I go ahead and send that. And then I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the very top of its output. And you'll see that Claude Opus 4.8 has a 1,000,000 token context window. Now, you might say, hey, but all you did was ask it how it is. Why did it go ahead and use a bunch of tokens already? The reason is because even before you send a message to AI, there's a bunch of things that are loading on the back end that is going to go ahead and eat up away at that token window. But that's the reason why having more working memory is helpful. It's not the end all be all, because there is a little bit of amnesia that happens that AI has even within a 1,000,000 token context window, but that's a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but the point is you understand that there's the brain, which is the LLM itself, which is the model itself. So Opus 4.8, that's the brain, that's the LLM. And then the LLM is going to be doing work and thinking about things using tokens. And then those tokens are going to be inside of a context window. And that context window is going to be made up of roughly about 1,000,000 tokens. Now, the other common question that I get is what happens when you hit that 1,000,000 token context window? Does that mean that the entire session is obsolete? It's no longer valid? Well, what happens is that when you hit that 1,000,000 token context window, there's something called compaction that occurs. And so the LLM, the model behind the scenes, is then going to compact all of the conversation that you had with the AI thus far, and it's going to provide a summary to the next agent. And so what happens is that you have Claude Opus 4.8, and you have one agent that you're talking to, which is the main session that you're in. And then once you hit a 1,000,000 token context window, it's then going to hand off behind the scenes without you even knowing. This is the reason why I'm making this video, to really uncover and demystify this, because a lot of times the business teams that I'm working with don't even know how AI works behind the scenes. And so it's like this black box of mystery, and they don't really understand why it's not giving them the output that they want. And so behind the scenes, what Claude and Anthropic have already gone ahead and done is they've abstracted that complexity away. And so what happens is that the second agent then starts without you even knowing about it. And then the first agent provides the second agent with a summary of what happened in that first 1,000,000 token context window. And then that second agent then has a new fresh 1,000,000 token context window. The alternative is that you can go ahead and start a new session by hitting new task. And then you can have a brand new session with a fresh 1,000,000 token context window. Why is that important? It means that whenever you are starting a task, whenever you are starting something new, ideally you want to be going ahead and starting a new session. Because if you're using the exact same session for different things, the AI is going to start to not only compact and start to get confused, but it's going to go ahead and start to confuse all of its different memories in place. And so you can kind of think of every single tab that you're using with AI, every single new session, as kind of like a new agent that you're then talking to. The other very common question that I get is, Yaseen, right now you are inside of Cowork. Does everything that you just said apply also to chat? The answer to that question is yes, but with a caveat. What is that caveat? That caveat is that the chat product from Anthropic, the ChatGPT product from OpenAI, was made for consumers primarily, not for the purposes of professionals or businesses. Hence the reason why what they have done is they've tried to further simplify what the chat interface looks like. And so this idea of tokens and context window and LLM and all the stuff that we're talking about inside of this video, Anthropic is not going ahead and trying to get the average person, the average consumer, to understand that. Hence the reason why if you were to go ahead and try to do /context inside of here, it wouldn't work. But behind the scenes, all of that is still going on. There's still the context window, there's still the tokens that are being used, but it's just a different product that is being given to the masses compared to what is the product that is being given to the professionals and the people who are going to be using this for business purposes. This idea of a context window is also the reason why AI is not magic and why you cannot just point it to all of the information in a business and tell it to do something, because there's going to be a limit of how much it can remember. And so a lot of times when I'm speaking with teams and businesses, they're thinking, oh, I can just go ahead and send it all of the transcripts or all of the information that my company has ever done, and it's going to go ahead and give me some sort of legible answer. The answer to that is no, because it's going to fill up that context window. To give you a rough estimate, this is not exact, but rough roughly 1 million tokens in terms of a context window is about 1,000 pages, okay? Now, keep in mind, tokens don't directly translate to, of course, pages, but that's the rough estimate that you can think of. It's about 1,000 pages of information. Yes, it can be a lot, but it's not going to be, let me point it at my CRM, let me give it all of the customer conversations, let me give it all of the transcripts, let me give it everything about my entire business, and it's going to be able to remember that or do something with that. The answer to that is no. You have to understand the idea of tokens and context window. So if that's the idea of the brain, and then within that brain were the three terms that were critical to know: LLM, tokens, and context window. The fourth term that's going to be very important for you to know is what gives the AI hands and feet. That word is going to be harness. The harness is what then takes the brain and it gives it hands and feet so that way it can do something. So let me break that down a little bit more and simplify it. So if you remember the original ChatGPT that came out a couple years ago, it was brilliant. It was like a brain that you could talk to, but the thing is that it didn't have access to your email. It didn't have access to your files. It really couldn't also search the web when it first came out. It couldn't take any action. And so it didn't have hands and feet. It only had the brain. And so as a result, a lot of times what you had to do is you had to copy and paste out of ChatGPT. So you'd have one browser open, you're asking it to write an email, and then you're going ahead and copying it, and then you're going ahead and pasting that inside of the email. In fact, unfortunately, that's the way that a lot of businesses are still using AI today, is that they're using AI as if it was the same AI from a couple years ago. But what they don't understand is because of this invention of this thing called a harness, now AI is able to go ahead and take action. And so if you can imagine that if the LLM, right, is the actual brain and you have the tokens and the context windows there, then the harness is the body that's built around that brain. It's going to be everything that allows the brain to go out there and do something. It's going to go ahead and allow it to have access to tools. It's going to allow it to be able to remember things. It's going to allow it to be able to take action. And so you get tools, memory. There's also something called guardrails in there, so it has some safety features as well. And then the other thing is that the harness gives the brain the ability to loop, so that way it can then work for days, weeks, months by itself. All of that is unlocked because of the harness. And the clearest example of what a harness is actually Cowork and Claude Code. Maybe you've heard about these, maybe you've even used them, is Claude Cowork and Claude Code are examples of what a harness is. And so there's the actual underlying model, right? So in this case, you'll see Claude Opus 4.8 is what is running inside of this chat. You'll see if I go to new task, all of these are the different models, right? So the models that I can go ahead and select that it's going to run inside of this session. But then the scaffolding, the wrapper that is around that model that is going to allow that model to do some sort of work, to be able to connect to different pieces, to connect to the CRM, to connect to the customer support platform, that is going to happen as a result of the harness. And that is Cowork and Claude Code in Anthropic's ecosystem. And then if you've heard about it in OpenAI's ecosystem, they have something called Codex, and that is also known as a harness. The reason why this is critical if you are working inside of a business that you need to understand is that the product is the harness. Prior to this invention of a harness, LLMs and AIs really weren't that smart and they really weren't that capable. We had the brains, right? We had ChatGPT, we had Claude, we had Gemini, but they couldn't do anything. But then that's what changed in 2025 and 2026. And we're going to talk about what an AI agent is in just a second. And I'm building your understanding layer by layer because you're now going to understand, oh, so an AI agent became usable. It became useful for me inside of the business because of this invention of this thing called a harness. And so when harnesses got so good, that is really what went ahead and created the ability for agents to do work inside of businesses. Prior to the invention of a harness, there were no such thing as an AI agent end to end. It was really just the LLM. It was just a brain that you could chat with back and forth, but it couldn't do much more than that. But now, because of the invention of the AI harness, we have the entire story now. We have now the brain and the body that can come together in order to build out what we know now as an agent. And so an agent is very simply, it is now a brain, it is intelligence, it is the LLM that can act. It is something that can now take action. And so now, once the brain meets the harness, that AI agent can go ahead and finally do the work that you need it to do. And so those are the 5 terms that you really need to understand. LLM we talked about, which was large language model. We talked about token, which is the calories of AI. We talked about the context window, which is its ability to remember things inside of that context window. We talked about the harness, which is the body that unlocks for it to be able to do work. And then the 5th and final word that you need to understand in order to understand AI is agent. And so the agent then is the worker that can go out there and do work. And the real unlock for this is that it's not just an AI that can answer questions back and forth. And so, like I said, we work with so many businesses that treat AI, unfortunately, as if it is just this chatbot that you can go back and forth with, which is really only taking advantage of the brain, but not the harness. And so now the job of AI implementation and AI architecture has become, now that we have this entire AI agent, how do we then create the use cases that would unlock for it the ability for it to do different types of work? And now can it go ahead and not only read the email, can it then draft the email, can it then actually send the email, or like we talked about, you being able to have a human in the loop is going to be an important piece of it, but then can it actually go ahead and find its own mistakes as well? And so that's the difference between it just drafting an email and it being able to then run the entire task end to end, just like any other teammate or employee inside of the organization might be able to do. Now, you guys know the big thing I like to talk about on this channel is making AI practical. So let's talk about what an agent looks like function by function, department by department. What does an AI agent look like in sales? The lowest hanging fruit that we have seen inside of our own companies and across all of the teams that we work with is being able to handle all of the busy work using an AI agent. And so now you can actually point an AI agent at a deal and it can actually go through and do all of the steps that a rep would not want to do. So for example, prior to the sales rep having to meet with the customer, jumping on a call, an AI agent can prepare what that call needs to look like and what all of the information needs to be presented on that call. It can go ahead and handle the follow-up, again, with the human in the loop. It can actually go ahead and update what the CRM information needs to look like, so that way leadership can ensure that they are getting all of the information they need in order to do forecasting, and then every single deal is properly organized inside of the pipeline. And so before the sales rep even enters into the room, before they pick up the phone, before they get onto the Zoom call, all of that is already being handled by the AI agent. When it comes to marketing, now when you set up AI agents, they are able to go ahead and take that same idea from a marketing perspective, and they can get so much more output in terms of content, in terms of paid advertising, in terms of outreach, in terms of outbound. All of that can now happen at scale, because previously the one individual who was working in marketing, there was not enough hours in the day for them to be able to create the different posts, the emails, the newsletters, the videos. But now one piece of content can now become 10 pieces of content by feeding it to an AI agent and being able to go ahead, and remember, it now has hands. It can now go ahead and actually schedule all of those things on the various different platforms as well. Not only that, but then you can also have an AI agent that is already trained ahead of time. And when we say train, all we're saying is we're talking about giving it different skills. I have other videos that you can look at in terms of what an AI skill is. But when you say train, you can give it a skill, which is having all of the brand information, all of the avatar, the audience, and all of that stuff. So that way the marketing team isn't having to start from a blank page. The AI agents can go ahead and draft all of the pieces of content ahead of time. So that way from there, the human can do what they do best, which is the creativity and the judgment and the taste, but it's already going ahead and taking it 40, 50, 60, 80% of the way there. And then last but not least, of course, you can go ahead and actually have it scan what is going on in the market right now. What are the competitors doing? Well, you can go ahead and actually feed it different transcripts from the sales team, and then go ahead and have the AI agent extract what are going to be the important pieces that marketing can utilize inside of their campaigns. Not to mention what AI agents can then do in ops and support. And so an AI agent can take a multi-step task that would eat up a team's entire day, and it can run it from start to finish, and then also go ahead and put it there for the human to approve it. So for example, whenever there is a support ticket that has gone ahead and created by a customer, well, an AI agent can go ahead and draft the reply from the knowledge base, because now that it has that harness, it can access different tools, and then the team can go ahead and approve it and send it from there. It can go ahead and handle follow-up. It can go ahead and handle all of the filing in terms of the logs, the tags, the documentation, the enablement, the training. All of that can be handled by an AI agent. And so that's the reason why when you understand these 5 words that we went ahead and talked about, which is LLM, it's the brain that this entire piece runs on. We talked about tokens, which is the unit in terms of what it costs. Everything is counted in tokens. The memory, which is going to be the context window. The harness, which is going to be the body. And then the agent, which is going to be the worker. Now, it does not matter which platform you then go to. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, all of those are going to be contingent upon these 5 fundamental concepts and words that you are learning. And so whenever you go to any AI product, because these things are changing so rapidly, it's about understanding the foundations and the fundamentals, which are going to allow you to demystify and see through all of the hype. And now you can ask informed questions to say, okay, well, what is a context window on that? What type of LLM model is it using? How's the harness around it? What is this agent able to do for me and for my teams and for my organization and for my business? All of that now gets unlocked because of the scaffolding of understanding that you now have after going through this video. And so my challenge to you is the next time anybody inside of your organization, any vendor, any person who's trying to sell you something starts talking about AI, I would urge you to actually force them to clarify their terminology. This is the reason why every legal contract in the world has a paragraph in the very beginning that defines the terms. And unfortunately, in the age of AI, everybody just throwing terms left and right. And so the habit of clarifying those terms based off of this cheat sheet that you've gone ahead and learned inside of this video is going to be the thing that separates the people who understand AI because they ask the clarifying questions from a place of being informed, as opposed to those people who just nod. And then the truth is that most of the people in the meeting don't even understand what the heck is being talked about. And then from this understanding, you can then start to ask the question, so what? What can it actually do now that we've already gone ahead and talked about what model it is, what harness it is, and all that kind of stuff? Hence the reason why in the next video, we're going to go ahead and talk about what are the AI skills that you can then put into the context window. What are the files that you can increase the speed at which AI can learn? And so I would recommend you go ahead and check out that AI skills video next.